59 previously sealed court documents relating to paedophile Jeffrey Epstein have been released. The documents have been highly anticipated after a US judge ordered them to be unsealed in December. And they name a number of Epstein's associates, mostly men. The hundreds of pages released relate to a 2015 defamation case brought by Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's victims. She sued Epstein accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell after Maxwell publicly branded her a liar. That case was settled in Giuffre's favor for an undisclosed sum, thought to be millions of dollars. Maxwell is now serving a 20-year prison term for sex trafficking convictions. One of the most interesting of the documents is a record of the deposition of Joanna Sjoberg, another alleged victim of Epstein. And her testimony once again appears to implicate disgraced royal Prince Andrew. Andrew was named in a sexual assault lawsuit brought against him by Giuffre in 2022. He reportedly paid Giuffre $12 million to settle that case. Afterwards, Andrew stepped back from public life and the Queen stripped him of his titles. Here's what Sjoberg alleges about the prince in her deposition. Sjoberg: at one point, Ghislaine told me to come upstairs, and we went into a closet and pulled out the puppet, the caricature of Prince Andrew, and brought it down. And there was a little tag on the puppet that said Prince Andrew on it. And that's when I knew who he was, lawyer. And what did the puppet look like? Sjoberg: it looked like him. And she brought it down and presented it to him. And that was a great joke because apparently it was a production from a show on BBC. And they decided to take a picture with it in which Virginia and Andrew sat on a couch. They put the puppet on Virginia's lap, and I sat on Andrew's lap, and they put the puppet's hand on Virginia's breast, and Andrew put his hand on my breast, and they took a photo. Now, that puppet is thought to be one of the Prince Andrew caricatures that featured on the BBC Spitting Image show. This is just one example of the puppets used to satirize Andrew on that program. It appeared in the mid-1980s. Sjoberg's deposition supports Virginia Giuffre's claim that she was sexually abused by Prince Andrew. It's, of course, an allegation Prince Andrew has always denied. And Giuffre also claimed she was abused by high-profile lawyer Alan Dershowitz. This is what the document alleges about him. One such powerful individual that Epstein forced then-minor Jane Doe, number 3, to have sexual relations with was former Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz, a close friend of Epstein's and well-known criminal defense attorney. Epstein required Jane Doe number 3 to have sexual relations with Dershowitz on multiple occasions or numerous occasions while she was a minor, not only in Florida, but also on private planes in New York, New Mexico, and the US Virgin Islands. In addition to being a participant in the abuse of Jane Doe number 3 and other minors, Dershowitz was an eyewitness to the sexual abuse of many other minors by Epstein and several of Epstein's co-conspirators. Now, Jane Doe number 3 has been identified in media reports as Virginia Giuffre. But since that deposition was given, Giuffre has withdrawn her claims against Dershowitz. In 2022, she dropped her lawsuit against the prominent lawyer, saying she may have made a mistake in her identification of him. And Dershowitz has released this statement since this latest release of documents. The documents prove my innocence. The woman who initially accused me subsequently stated that she may have misidentified me and she withdrew her lawsuit against me. I hope that all the documents are released, as I have always urged. Dershowitz also appeared on Fox News, where he made this rather bizarre argument.
I understand all the feminist groups and the radicals who think this is the worst thing in the world, that anybody ever had any contact with Jeffrey Epstein. Where are all those radical feminists when it comes to the Hamas rapes of young Jewish girls, sexual abuse, beheadings? They are quiet. They are silent. The incredible hypocrisy of the Me Too movement. Me Too, except if you're a Jew. And I want to have a list of all the radical feminists who are pushing hard, and I understand that, to get all these names revealed. And I want to know how many of them have ever actually condemned Hamas for the rapes that we now know occurred and the murders that occurred. How many have been silent, and how many, like the National Lawyers Guild, have actually approved of what Hamas did? So let's put this in context.
Let's put this in context. The two things you were talking about have absolutely nothing to do with each other, right? I have never seen a more bizarre non sequitur, right? Let's make I was on the Epstein list, but let's make another list. And it's a list of feminists who haven't condemned Hamas. What? What are you talking about? Dershowitz is set to, apparently, it's been reported that Netanyahu wants him to represent Israel in the International Court of Justice to defend them against claims of genocide. So I don't know if Dershowitz is going to be sort of putting forward arguments of that standard. I know he recently wrote in a conservative magazine, Compact, that it can't be genocide because there aren't gas chambers like in the Holocaust, which is not a particularly valid legal argument. A number of other well-known people are named in the papers, though, of course, that doesn't implicate them in any wrongdoing. In her deposition, Sjoberg reports that Jeffrey Epstein told her, quote, "Clinton likes them young," referring to girls. That, of course, there was referring to former President Bill Clinton. Sjoberg, it's worth noting, says she never met or saw Clinton personally. A magician, David Copperfield, is also mentioned, with Sjoberg alleging, quote, "He questioned me if I was aware that girls were getting paid to find other girls." Other celebrities mentioned include Michael Jackson, who Sjoberg alleges she met at Epstein's Palm Spring house, but says there was no contact between them. Another document unsealed by the court is an email from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell. In it, Epstein writes this: "You can issue a reward to any of Virginia's friends, acquaintances, family that come forward and help prove her allegations are false. The strongest is the Clinton dinner and the new version in the Virgin Islands that Stephen Hawking participated in an underage orgy." And so they're discussing sort of paying people for evidence that can disprove Virginia Giuffre's claims. Stephen Hawking mentioned there was photographed on Epstein Island in 2006 while he attended a physics conference on a neighboring Caribbean island. I say Epstein's Island, not Epstein Island. There has never been any accusation of wrongdoing against the late physicist. Also appearing in the documents is former US President Donald Trump. He is mentioned just 4 times, but no accusations are leveled against him. Ghislaine Maxwell is also mentioned in the documents 208 times. In one document, the allegations of Epstein's former household manager, Alfredo Rodriguez, are reported like this: "I know she went out and took pictures in the pool because later on I would see them at the desk or at the house, and nude. 99% of the time they were topless. They were European girls." Rodriguez is then asked, did they appear to be doing anything sexual? He says, "Yes, ma'am." And in these instances, were the girls doing sexual things with other girls? He says, "Yes, ma'am." And I'm still talking about the pictures on Miss Maxwell's computer. "Yes, ma'am." After he left Epstein's employment, Rodriguez also testified that Maxwell threatened him, alleging that she told him never to discuss her or contact her again. So this is Alfredo Rodriguez again. She said, "I forbid you that you're going to be. I will be sorry if I contact any of her friends again." She said something like, "Don't open your mouth," or something like that. "I'm a civil, humble. I came as an immigrant to service people. And right now you feel a little, I'm 55 and I'm afraid. First of all, I don't have a job, but I'm glad this is on tape because I don't want nothing to happen to me." So clearly someone who's very scared of Ghislaine Maxwell and someone who knows about what Ghislaine Maxwell was doing. So you can read between the lines what's going on there. Following the release of the files, Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyer, Arthur Adila, appeared on News Nation.
You talk to Ghislaine almost every week. You know, is she going to start talking?
No. Well, I don't think she has anything to talk about, except maybe that if you look at this crime, this overall crime, it's all about men abusing women for a long period of time, a lot of men. That's what we're waiting for this list. And there's only one person in jail, a woman. It's not one guy behind bars for all of these crimes, this sex trafficking.
She brought him the women, the girl. I should say women, young girls, right?
First of all, she is absolutely, unequivocally denying all of that. She always has.
#MeToo, but for Ghislaine Maxwell, who procured underage girls for a paedophile. Epstein, of course, did spend time in jail, where he died by apparent suicide in 2019 after being charged with sex trafficking minors. And French model scout, Jean-Luc Brunel, that's another Epstein associate accused of sex trafficking by Giuffre, also supposedly committed suicide in 2022 while in a Parisian jail cell. That was after he was charged with drugging and raping a 17-year-old girl. The deaths were, to say the very least, suspicious. And another question that won't go away is whether Epstein's abuse ring had purposes other than sexual gratification. Now, according to the Daily Mail, Epstein list reignites suspicion the pedo financier was working for Mossad and blackmailing the elite with help of information he gleaned from useful idiot Prince Andrew after meeting Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak at least 36 times. Of course, Mossad is Israel's intelligence agency. Now, the article quotes a former Mossad operative, Ari Ben Menash, as saying this: Prince Andrew wasn't being blackmailed, he was being used as a useful idiot. He was being used to bring in some of the celebrities. Ben Menash worked for Israel's military intelligence directorate from 1977 to 1987, and his allegations were backed up by Epstein's former mentor, Stephen Hoffenberg, who claimed that Epstein had referred to his relationship with Prince Andrew as his Super Bowl trophy. The article goes on to say, this Epstein was introduced to the spy game by Ghislaine's father, Robert, according to Mossad agent Ben Menash, who claims to have been the British media tycoon's handler. A friend of the Maxwells, Laura Goldman, further stated she believed not only that Robert Maxwell was a Mossad spy, but that Ghislaine carried on his work. Robert Maxwell is a very interesting figure in all of this, and like Epstein, he was subject to a mysterious, suspicious death. The Mail writes this. So Robert Maxwell was said to have drowned while aboard his luxury yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, in Spain's Canary Islands in 1991. At the time, the tycoon was facing major financial woes, having raided $623 million from his media company, Mirror Group's pension funds, to try and cover his massive debts. Despite the scandal, he was given a hero's funeral on Israel's Mount of Olives, attended by former intelligence chiefs, the Israeli Prime Minister, and the Israeli President. So clearly someone very connected to Israeli intelligence. From the Mail, while police ruled out foul play in his death, theories which of suicide or even a potential assassination by Mossad still persist. In their book, Robert Maxwell, Israel's Super Spy, The Life and Murder of a Media Mogul, authors Gordon Thomas and Martin Dillon suggest a conflict between Maxwell's public interests and his private role as a spy are what led to his mysterious death. They believe Maxwell was helping himself to Mossad money in a bid to recoup his losses with deadly consequences. Now, I haven't read that book in question, and it's not entirely clear to me how someone would just help themselves to Mossad money. I know it's just lying around. What's undeniable, though, is that a Mossad agent would have lots of knowledge that could embarrass the organization. If Maxwell was in financial trouble, you could see why that would be a risk for Israel. When you're in financial trouble, you're vulnerable. When you're vulnerable, people might be able to get secrets out of you. And if you have lots of secrets that would be valuable or that would be damaging for Mossad and Israel, what's going to happen, right? What do intelligence agencies do when they lose trust in a high-value agent? Now, I'm not sure there are many limits. Of course, working for an intelligence agency could also have benefits. In 2007, Epstein got an extraordinarily generous plea deal after he was put on trial for sex crimes against minors. The US attorney who cut that deal was a man named Alexander Acosta. Acosta would later go on to become Donald Trump's Labor Secretary. And according to the Daily Beast, this is what went down in the run-up to that appointment. Epstein's name, I was told, had been raised by the Trump transition team when Alexander Acosta, the former US attorney in Miami, who'd infamously cut Epstein a non-prosecution plea deal back in 2007, was being interviewed for the job of Labor Secretary. The plea deal put a hard stop to a separate federal investigation of alleged sex crimes with minors and trafficking. So a great deal for Epstein. Is the Epstein case going to cause a problem for confirmation hearings? Acosta had been asked. Acosta had explained breezily, apparently, that back in the day, he'd had just one meeting on the Epstein case. He'd cut the non-prosecution deal with one of Epstein's attorneys because he had been told to back off, that Epstein was above his pay grade. I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone, he told his interviewers in the Trump transition, who evidently thought that that was a sufficient answer and went ahead and hired Acosta. Now, the Labor Department had no comment when asked about this. Wow. Right, as you're saying, the plea deal, the extraordinarily generous plea deal, apparently here, Alexander Acosta told the Trump Transition Committee, oh yeah, that they told me he was intelligent, so to back off. Right? Wow. That's from Vicky Ward, who's actually written a lot of really good articles on Epstein. She's got one in Rolling Stone that I read just before we went live, which is definitely worth checking out. Jeffrey Epstein, therefore, certainly appears to be well connected to American intelligence. He is known to have met with the current head of the CIA, Bill Burns, on multiple occasions. That was in 2014, so long after it became apparent that he was involved in sex crimes. And according to his brother, Epstein had significant compromat on leading US politicians, including Trump and Hillary Clinton. On Wednesday, Epstein's brother told this to the New York Post. Here's a direct quote, so from Jeffrey Epstein. "If I said what I know about both candidates, they'd have to cancel the election." That's what Jeffrey told me in 2016. So we have clear links between Ghislaine Maxwell, her father, Epstein, and Mossad, and evidence that the information Epstein gathered gave him real leverage over politicians in the United States. Now, is that how he got away with his crimes? Or is that why he was doing his crimes in the first place? Right? Is this what this was all about? He was collecting compromat for various intelligence agencies. Well, last year, the Rumble host, Kim Everson, put the Mossad allegations to Alan Dershowitz.
Many of us suspect that Jeffrey Epstein was an asset to Mossad, and that Ghislaine Maxwell was in fact an agent of Mossad. There's a lot
Totally
of evidence
nonsense.
that point to this direction, and
No,
that they
there's no
were
evidence.
operating a blackmail operation in order to get very powerful people, including people like yourself, in precarious positions to where you could potentially work on behalf of the state of Israel or protect the state of Israel.
I've been
in
working
some
on
way.
the state of Israel. I've been working for the state of Israel since before you were born. Jeffrey Epstein once visited me in Israel. He had never been there. He didn't know anybody in Israel. He didn't work for the Mossad. The Mossad wouldn't hire him. And I hope he had videotapes of everybody, because they would show I never did anything improper. I have one other question. Are you used to having people come on your show to talk about one subject and then sandbagging them on another subject without any warning? Because it's nice to know you do that, and it will make certain that I have nothing to hide. I'm happy to talk about any of this, but I'm used to more ethical journalism.
No, we actually did notify the people who booked you onto the show that you would be asked about Epstein, and they assured us that you were aware
No,
of
they
this.
never notified me about that, and you'd have to show me that email.
Okay. One last question. Do you think that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself?
No, of course not. Well, he didn't kill himself without the help of some people. He'd kill himself, but he killed himself with the help of guards. He didn't do it by himself. He couldn't have done that, obviously, though the videos were turned off, and the guards turned their back, and his cellmate left. So I think he killed himself, but he killed himself with the assistance of some people in law enforcement.
That's a great last question. I really got a lot out of him on that last question. Aaron, what do you make of all of this? Sort of these, when this is covered in the mainstream media, in the UK at least, it's nearly always just sort of, oh, how embarrassing for Prince Andrew. But it does seem like potentially we can sort of understand a bit more about how intelligence agencies and power and social connections between elites works by sort of looking at this case. Obviously, lots of it is somewhat speculative, but it does seem like there is a fair amount of circumstantial evidence that intelligence agencies were involved in sort of the Epstein ring.
I mean, the Epstein story is extraordinary. It's an extraordinary story. And like you say, in the UK, somewhat understandably, we're viewing it entirely through the prism of Prince Andrew. Of course, he's one of the most high-profile names associated with this. Some say the favoured son of the previous monarch, Elizabeth II. So that's understandable, but still, I think it can sometimes undermine what's happened here. Let's get to first facts here. The New York Times last year wrote that the estate that Epstein left behind was valued at $600 million. $600 million. This was a guy without a degree. He'd started a mathematics degree at NYU, never completed it. He'd worked for Bear Stearns, very junior role. He'd done like consulting, and he'd done this, and he'd been involved in like a hedge fund, but nobody really knew what this guy did for a job. And when he died, he left £600 million that we know of. Okay? That we know of. There was stuff before the global financial crisis saying that he was worth about $1 billion. And at the time, people were saying, oh, it's all kind of not really real. It's not fake. It's all front. Like people say about Trump, or like people say about Elon Musk, it's equity in these overpriced, stock in these overpriced businesses. It's not real money. He's left assets worth £600 million. Obviously, that's winding down because of legal costs and whatnot, but £600 million. And one of the primary beneficiaries of his estate was his most recent girlfriend. So this is another layer to all of this, Michael, is this guy knew everybody. He was able to entrap so many powerful people. Nobody really knows where his money came from. Some people have asserted that really he got particularly wealthy after his relationship with Robert Maxwell. But of course, Robert Maxwell had his own problems. But when you hear that, alarm bells should go off. And like you say, it is circumstantial, Michael. This person made allegedly tremendous amounts of money after coming into contact with Robert Maxwell, who allegedly had contact with certain security agencies. It is strange. It is strange. And I think it actually says something quite significant about early 21st century sort of liberal politics, that, he was he was giving money to Harvard. He was a big funder of Harvard. He was in the Trilateral Commission. I'm not making any suggestions about what that means or there being a big conspiracy. These are very powerful mainstream organizations, institutions. He was close to Bill Clinton. He repeatedly visited the White House. This was a serious person, taken seriously, seen as a big patron of the arts and good causes. And nobody sort of thought, well, where's the money coming from? Because 600 million is a lot of cash, and you can work on the assumption he lost a significant amount during the global financial crisis. Many people, of course, did in the financial services industries. And look, it's almost like you take away Prince Andrew, and there is an even better story here, bigger story here. Going back to what Dershowitz was saying, I mean, it was an interesting answer, right? I find it not particularly credible that in that environment, you would ask guards to turn their backs, turn off the camera, your cellmate leaves, and then you kill yourself. Maybe. I mean, he made his last will days before his death, as I understand it. Who knows? We can speculate. It's something I think in 2024 I want to cover a lot more here at Novara Media, Michael. Ghislaine Maxwell, Robert Maxwell, and Jeffrey Epstein, because it really underscores the very ad hoc nature of how global elites talk to one another. Bill Gates would hang out there and Prince Andrew, and he'd be pals with Bill Clinton. And we like to look at power as systemic. We like to look at power, of course it is in many ways, and operating very rationally when at an elite level. But on the other hand, actually, lots of the people have no idea what they're doing. They are charmed by somebody with charisma or who they think is wealthy. And I think that, to me, is why Epstein is so interesting. Our elite like to think they're so much smarter than us, so much more psychologically attuned than we are, emotionally intelligent than we are. I think there's an argument for the opposite, frankly.